Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're diving deep into something you, our listener, flag as really fascinating. This noticeable shift in how we think about work and life.
Especially among younger folks.
Exactly. You shared a bunch of insightful articles looking at the apparent fading of hustle culture and, well, the growing buzz around the soft life.
Yeah, and there's some interesting angles on why this is happening. We've even got some, pretty eye-opening data on what all that relentless pushing can actually do to us.
Right. So our goal today is to get beyond the headlines. We want to really understand what these ideas mean, why they're gaining so much traction, and maybe what the ripple effects might be for you and how we all define success these days.
It's quite a moment, isn't it? For decades, this relentless pursuit of more professionally, at least it felt almost like the default setting. And now the sources you've provided suggest a significant rethink, a real pushback against that ingrained mentality.
Okay, so let's get into the nitty-gritty. What exactly is hustle culture? When we say that, what are we talking about?
Well, think of it as a mindset where work and being productive, they absolutely dominate everything else.
Everything.
Pretty much. Long hours aren't just common, they're like glorified. There's this underlying pressure to constantly be busy, almost as if being idle is some kind of moral failing.
Okay.
And your worth as a person can get really tangled up with your professional achievements. You see it in those slogans, right? Rise and grind, no days off.
Yeah, you can sleep when you're dead.
Yeah.
That one always felt a bit much.
Exactly. It's about relentless output, constantly pushing.
That constant feeling of needing to be on and producing. Wow, it's exhausting just thinking about it. Where did this all come from? Was it always this intense?
Well, not really, no. Our sources point to a few key developments.
Yeah.
The expansion of various industries in the U.S. back in the 70s that created more competitive work environments.
Right.
But the tech boom of the 90s really kind of turbocharged this. You had these highly visible CEOs putting in absolutely insane hours, practically living in the office.
And that became the model.
It was framed as the blueprint for success, yeah. Couple that with all the societal messaging that equates high achievement with status, and, well, you've got fertile ground for hustle culture to take root.
So for a while, this equation of more work equals more success felt pretty ingrained. But now, like you said, we're seeing a real wave of people saying, actually, no. What's fueling this rejection, especially among younger generations?
A big piece of it is the millennial experience. I mean, they were often told that if they worked hard, got the degrees, ticked all the boxes, they'd be set.
The classic promise.
Exactly. But then many were hit with economic instability, mountains of debt, and this feeling that the promised payoff just wasn't there. And Helen Peterson's idea of the burnout generation really hits that constant pressure to optimize every single aspect of life, leaving them feeling perpetually drained.
Like they ran the race they were told to run.
But the finish line kept moving, or maybe it wasn't what they expected. It's like this constant sense of pressure, almost a noose, she called it.
Wow. That makes sense. There's a sense of betrayal almost. What about Gen Z? Their take on this seems even more, well, direct.
Yeah, Gen Z has come up in a very different world. Their digital natives generally seem more progressive and definitely more comfortable challenging the status quo right from the start.
They don't seem afraid to question things.
Not at all. And they've also lived through significant global crises, economic wobbles, a pandemic, heightened awareness of social injustices. These experiences seem to have instilled a desire for a different way of doing things.
And they use platforms like TikTok.
Right. TikTok has become this surprisingly powerful space for voicing anti-work sentiments. Ideas like quiet quitting really took off there. It's like they're observing the burnout around them and actively saying, nope, we're choosing a different path.
And the pandemic seems to have been a major catalyst here, amplifying these feelings across different age groups.
Oh, absolutely. It forced this global pause, didn't it?
Yeah.
A moment to really reflect on what was important. Many people, especially those in non-essential roles, started questioning the inherent value of just grinding away endlessly. Health, relationships, personal well-being, these suddenly came into sharper focus.
And in that context, some comments just landed really badly.
Yeah, like that Kim Kardashian comment about, get your fucking ass up and work. In that moment, for so many people grappling with very real challenges, it just highlighted this huge disconnect between that old school hustle mentality and the current reality.
It really did. And it's not just about individual feelings of burnout, is it? There are bigger economic and social factors at play in this rejection.
Exactly. The rise and grind narrative can sound pretty hollow when you look at the bigger picture of economic inequality, instability.
Right.
The rewards of all that hustle simply aren't distributed equally. Many people face systemic barriers, lower income communities, marginalized groups, people with significant caregiving responsibilities where just working harder doesn't necessarily lead to upward mobility.
So the promise isn't universally true.
Not at all. And you see it in things like the well-documented disparities in venture capital funding for women and minority founders. It just shows the starting line isn't the same for everyone.
So it's not just about feeling tired. There's this growing awareness that the whole system isn't necessarily rewarding relentless effort fairly. Now, we have some really interesting data points that actually challenge the fundamental assumptions of hustle culture, right? Like, it's not even clear that working more makes us more productive.
That's such a crucial point. The 2022 research from Expert Market is quite revealing. They actually found a correlation between countries with shorter average work minutes and more vacation time.
And higher productivity.
And higher levels of productivity. Think about that working less can actually mean getting more done.
How does that work?
Well, one potential reason is that people who have adequate rest and downtime are likely more focused. They're probably less prone to errors caused by fatigue. And maybe even more creative because their minds have space to breathe,
That makes sense.
Similarly, a Harvard Business Review study pointed out that taking regular breaks during the workday isn't a productivity killer. It actually boosts focus and output.
It's almost counterintuitive to that whole hustle mentality.
Completely. But the data seems to back it up.
It totally flips the script on that more hours equals more output idea. And the information on the actual health costs of overwork is pretty alarming too.
It really is. WHO data from back in 2016 linked over 700,000 deaths globally to the effects of working long hours.
700,000. Wow.
Yeah. And the increased risks of psychological issues like depression and physical problems, type 2 diabetes, hypertension. These are well-established consequences of prolonged burnout.
It takes a serious toll.
Definitely. And it's not just impacting rank-and-file workers. Even at the top levels, a 2022 Deloitte survey found that a significant 70% of C-level executives were considering jumping ship.
70%.
70%. Looking for roles that offered better work-life balance. That's a huge number, and it speaks volumes about the unsustainability of that extreme work culture.
Those are some really stark numbers. It makes you wonder, if you're seeing some of these red flags in your own life, or maybe in the lives of people around you, what are some of the key signs that someone might be deep in the throes of hustle culture?
Well, there are several indicators to watch for. A constant state of busyness, feeling the need to always be doing something work-related, that's a big one.
Right.
An unhealthy level of perfectionism where even minor mistakes feel catastrophic. That can also be a symptom. Sleep problems, consistently neglecting self-care like exercise or hobbies.
Pushing those things aside.
Exactly.
Sure.
Experiencing heightened anxiety. Those are some psychological signs. You might also notice a dip in creativity, maybe a shrinking social circle as work takes precedence over personal relationships.
Yeah.
And even physical manifestations of stress headaches, stomach issues, things like that.
Right.
A persistent sense of dissatisfaction with work, even though you're putting in the hours. Constantly comparing your achievements to others, difficulty switching off from work, really disconnecting.
That inability to unplug.
Yeah, a lack of clear boundaries between your professional and personal life. And ultimately, that feeling of just utter exhaustion we call burnout. Those are all major warning signs. You might also see impaired decision-making and just a general decline in your emotional well-being.
Those are all incredibly relatable experiences for many, I think. And it's not just these vague feelings. We see very concrete examples of hustle culture playing out in the workplace every day, don't we?
Oh, absolutely. The expectation of routinely working long hours, including weekends, that's a classic example.
The norm in some places.
Right. The pressure to be constantly available via email or messaging, even outside of normal work hours, that just erodes any sense of downtime.
Mm-hmm.
Unrealistic deadlines that force teams into constant overdrive. A disregard for personal boundaries, like expecting attendance at late-night meetings or, checking work during vacation.
Yeah.
And a workplace ethos where pushing through exhaustion is somehow seen as admirable. That's a huge hallmark.
Right, like it's a badge of honor.
Exactly. You might also observe an excessive focus on hitting arbitrary productivity targets, maybe a culture of constant self-criticism among employees who feel they're never quite doing enough, a lack of genuine appreciation for effort, and just a systemic failure to encourage or even allow employees to truly disconnect and recharge.
It paints a pretty vivid and frankly draining picture of what this relentless work mentality looks like in
Right.
practice. Now let's pivot. Let's talk about the alternative that seems to be gaining traction, the rise of the sauce life.
Yeah.
What's the essence of this concept?
Yeah, the soft life, as our sources emphasize, it isn't about laziness or avoiding responsibility. Not at all.
Okay, good to clarify.
It's more a conscious choice to prioritize mental well-being, seek out more flexible ways of working, and actually truly savor the present moment instead of constantly sacrificing it for some future goal.
Living now, basically.
Right. It's about working smarter, not necessarily harder, and making sure your job doesn't completely consume your life. Key elements include earning enough to live comfortably without sacrificing your happiness. Comfortably, not excessively.
Exactly. Actively focusing on your mental and physical health. Choosing a career that aligns with your values, not just chasing the biggest paycheck, and fundamentally having adequate time and energy for your life outside of work.
And this is seen as a reaction.
It's often seen as a direct response, particularly from Gen Z, to the burnout they witnessed maybe in the millennial generation or even their parents.
So it's not about suddenly deciding to become a trust fund baby overnight, because sometimes the name soft life sounds.
Right. No, it's not about avoiding effort. It's about a fundamental reevaluation of what constitutes a good life and how work fits into that picture. Even financial strategies seem to be adapting, with this idea of soft saving popping up.
Right, soft saving. That's interesting. How does that differ from the traditional, maybe more aggressive approach to saving?
Well, it's an interesting contrast to those really aggressive retirement savings plans we've often heard about. The idea seems to be that Gen Z is more inclined to balance saving for the future with enjoying experiences and prioritizing well-being now. So less deferral of gratification.
Kind of. They see value in living a fulfilling life now, not just accumulating wealth for some distant retirement that might not even happen or that they might be too burnt out to enjoy. It's about finding a more sustainable middle ground, maybe.
It reflects that emphasis on the here and now, on not constantly postponing joy. Interestingly, this isn't just a Western phenomenon, is it? Our sources highlighted some fascinating parallels elsewhere.
Yes, we came across some really intriguing examples, like in China, this Tangping movement.
Yeah, tell us about Tangping.
Tangping, it literally translates to lying flat. It's widely seen as China's version of quietly pushing back against that relentless work culture.
Lying flat, okay.
It's fueled by a similar sense of exhaustion and this desire to just opt out of the intense pressures of the Chinese work environment. The article mentions the highly controversial 996 work culture.
9 a.m. to 9 p.m., 6 days a week.
Exactly. And the significant public outcry, especially after the tragic death of a young content moderator, it's actually noteworthy that China's highest court and labor ministry have declared the 996 practice illegal now.
Wow, that's a real statement.
It signals a societal recognition, at least officially, of the need for change.
That's a powerful stance against extreme overwork. What about Japan's Satori Sadai? That's another fascinating example of a generational shift.
Yeah, the Satori Sadai, or Enlightenment generation, this is Japan's Gen Z cohort. They're characterized by a relative lack of interest in traditional markers of success, like rapid career advancement or, conspicuous consumption.
So not chasing the corner office or the fancy car.
They just don't seem to be as driven by those same desires for climbing the corporate ladder and acquiring material possessions as maybe previous generations were. It's almost as if they've already reached a state of, enlightenment or maybe just contentment.
It's like a collective reassessment of what truly brings satisfaction. And the article also pointed to the soft life movement, specifically within the Black female community. That seems to carry a unique and really important weight.
Yes, definitely. The soft life movement among Black women is often framed as a direct and necessary rejection of that pervasive, strong Black woman stereotype.
Right, that trope.
Which historically has placed this immense burden of resilience and tireless effort, often in the face of significant systemic challenges. This movement is about actively seeking peace, ease, and joy in all aspects of life.
And what does that look like practically?
Well, it can mean consciously choosing to maybe downshift in their careers or even leaving demanding jobs altogether. It's framed as a powerful act of self-care and reclaiming agency, prioritizing well-being over that constant expectation of strength and perseverance in potentially draining environments.
That's a really powerful message. Prioritizing self and pushing back against those deep-seated societal expectations. And then, slightly different but related, we have the broader phenomenon of digital nomads. That also seems to tap into this desire for a different way of living and working.
Absolutely. The estimated 35 million digital nomads globally. They're a clear illustration of people actively seeking out lifestyles that prioritize flexibility, autonomy, and experiences over those traditional fixed career paths.
Location independence.
Exactly. The rise of remote work has certainly enabled many to prioritize travel and a more maybe laid-back approach to their professional lives.
Of course, any significant societal shift like this is bound to have its critics or at least some counterarguments. What are some of the common concerns raised about the soft life philosophy?
Well, some argue that embracing a soft life might lead to a decline in ambition, or maybe that it's simply not a realistic option for everyone.
Right, the privilege argument.
Exactly, particularly for those in certain demanding professions or maybe more precarious economic situations. There's sometimes a concern that prioritizing ease could lead to a lack of productivity or societal progress, or that the very ability to pursue a soft life is a privilege not everyone can afford.
Which is a valid point to consider.
It is. However, it's crucial to remember, as our sources point out, that the core message isn't really about avoiding work entirely. It's about creating a more sustainable and balanced relationship with it. One where well-being isn't just sacrificed at the altar of relentless productivity.
Finding a better integration.
Right. Even people in more traditional roles are finding ways to incorporate aspects of this, maybe by setting firmer boundaries, prioritizing their personal time more intentionally.
It's about finding a healthier integration rather than complete disengagement. Okay, so for someone listening who feels drawn to this shift away from hustle culture, maybe feeling burnt out themselves, what are some practical, concrete steps they can take in their own life?
Yeah, there are several actionable strategies. First, maybe take some time to really identify your personal values, what truly matters to you outside of your career. That can be a powerful anchor.
Knowing your why.
Exactly. Then, actively establish boundaries around your work life. Things like setting specific work hours and limiting your availability outside those times for emails, messages, etc.
Easier said than done sometimes, but crucial.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Prioritizing self-care, whether it's ensuring you get enough sleep, taking regular breaks throughout the day, or actually using your vacation time that needs to become non-negotiable.
Not just nice to have.
Right. Recognizing your inherent worth as a person, separate from your professional accomplishments, that's also key. And finally, maybe make a conscious effort to be present and enjoy the journey, rather than constantly focusing only on the next achievement. Practicing mindfulness can be really helpful here.
Those are some really tangible steps individuals can take. What about from an organizational standpoint? What can companies do to support employees in recovering from burnout and maybe foster a culture that actually moves away from overwork?
Organizations have such a crucial role to play here. Creating an environment where open communication about workload and stress is encouraged and actually acted upon is essential.
Not just lip service.
No, offering flexible work arrangements can empower employees to better manage their responsibilities and their well-being. Actively promoting and respecting boundaries, discouraging those after-hours work expectations, that's vital.
Leading by example, too, presumably.
Absolutely. Providing access to mental health support resources like employee assistance programs, EAPs, that demonstrates a real commitment. Educating employees on effective time management skills can also help them feel more in control.
Little things can add up.
They do. Recognizing and celebrating achievements should happen without perpetuating the idea that constant overwork is necessary to get there. Encouraging regular breaks throughout the day, providing opportunities for professional development. Ultimately, it's about cultivating a supportive culture that values teamwork and prioritizes self-care.
So it really requires a shift in both individual mindsets and organizational policies and culture. We saw some interesting examples of companies that seem to be making this transition successfully, didn't we?
Yes, and these examples offer valuable insights. Basecamp, for instance, they famously implemented a 4-day summer work week and a strict no after-hours work policy.
And how did that go?
Well, it reportedly led to increased employee satisfaction and productivity. Microsoft Japan's experiment with a 4-day work week also resulted in a significant boost in productivity. And companies like Salesforce have actively cultivated what they call a people-first culture, with flexible work options and robust mental health support. These examples suggest that prioritizing employee well-being can actually be a driver of success rather than a detriment.
It's really encouraging to see those kinds of initiatives taking hold. Finally, our sources touched on the role that mental health surveys can play in identifying and addressing a potentially toxic hustle culture within an organization. How can those be a useful tool?
Yeah, mental health surveys can provide invaluable data. They give you a read on the overall well-being of employees and the prevailing workplace dynamics.
Like a temperature check?
Exactly.
Yeah.
They can help in the early identification of burnout by assessing stress levels, job satisfaction, work-life balance. These surveys can also shed light on the overall workplace culture is a culture of constant pressure and overwork dominant.
Pinpointing trouble spots.
Right. By identifying high-stress areas or departments, employers can target their interventions more effectively. Surveys can also help evaluate the impact of existing work-life balance initiatives and see where improvements are needed. Ultimately, the data gathered can inform concrete steps towards creating a healthier, more sustainable work environment.
And you included some examples of the kinds of questions that might be in such a survey. Listeners might find these useful just to think about regarding their own workplaces. Could you share a couple of those?
Certainly. Some examples, often using a rating scale like strongly agree to strongly disagree, might be, I often feel pressured to work beyond my contracted hours, or my workload is manageable.
Okay.
Maybe I feel I have a good balance between my work and personal life. My manager supports my well-being, and I feel comfortable taking time off when I need it. These types of questions can provide a quantifiable snapshot of employee perceptions and really highlight potential areas of concern.
This has been a truly insightful deep dive into this whole changing landscape of work and life priorities. To quickly recap some of the key things we've talked about. While hustle culture has been this powerful force driven by various historical economic factors,
For a long time.
yeah, for a long time, we're seeing a significant pushback now, particularly from younger generations, who are placing a greater emphasis on their overall well-being and finding a more sustainable work-life balance. The rise of the soft life represents this deliberate shift towards more intentional living and working, challenging that long-held notion that constant busyness is the only way to succeed.
And crucially, the data increasingly suggests that relentless overwork can actually be counterproductive and, of course, have serious negative consequences for our mental and physical health.
What's really striking is that growing understanding that personal well-being and genuine long-term productivity aren't opposing forces.
Right. In fact, they seem deeply intertwined. And as we saw with examples like Tengping in China and the Satori Sadai in Japan, this isn't just an isolated trend, but maybe a broader reevaluation happening across different cultures.
Absolutely. So as you, our listener, take a moment to reflect on your own relationship with work and any pressures you might be feeling, maybe consider this. What's one small, manageable step you could take today to inject just a little more soft life into your routine? Or maybe to consciously push back against any ingrained hustle tendencies you recognize?
And perhaps more profoundly, what unexpected benefits might you discover, not just in your personal life, but maybe also in your overall effectiveness, your creativity, by intentionally prioritizing rest and well-being? Something to think about.